This is a mock interview conducted by ForumIAS Academy at New Delhi. The interview panel includes eminent academicians, retired bureaucrats, and other luminaries. The objective of the program is to acquaint the candidate with the format and expectations of the personality test conducted by UPSC.
May I come in?
Please come in. Roopak?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Please come. Please sit down.
Thank you.
So how are you today, Roopak?
Very well, ma'am.
Good. And when is your interview?
It's on 4th of January, ma'am.
Oh, very close by, huh? And how many mocks have you done?
I've done 4 before this, ma'am.
Oh, this is the 5th. And what feedback did you get?
The most important one was I should be more calm, look less serious, and think a little before I speak. So.
Okay, very good, very good. And is this the first time you've reached the interview?
Yes, ma'am.
That's very good. And you are what? You are 3 and 4. Not very old. You're quite reasonably young. So Roopak, we were looking at your biodata and very intrigued. What is this entrepreneur in residence?
Ma'am, so Urban Company, the startup which I was working at, they created a new designation where only those projects would be taken up which are very risky and which most of the people would not be willing to undertake because they are most likely to fail. So that's why they gave it a fancy designation, entrepreneur in residence. So it signifies that you're acting and behaving like an entrepreneur there.
What was your role exactly?
I was taking up different projects to improve the operations efficiency. Just to give an example, in the AC repairing services, we were trying to see if we can use jet pumps, which were earlier used for cleaning of cars. So it was risky because it could have damaged the AC. The cost was really high.
So you were sort of piloting the projects before they were introduced into mainstream, huh?
Both piloting, planning, and then execution as well, ma'am.
So execution means what? I mean, was it also service delivery like services of XYZ?
Yes, ma'am. I was in the AC, electronics and appliances team. So the main project was whether jet pumps can be used for AC servicing or not.
What was the outcome?
The outcome was very positive, ma'am. Now we are using jet pumps for servicing of AC.
But the inverter ACs, they say, get spoiled with the jet pump. Mine was spoiled after servicing. 3 were spoiled. Because
yes,
they don't need such a strong current.
Exactly, ma'am. So we adjusted.
So you usually spoiled 3 of mine.
I'm sorry for your experience, ma'am, but we did calibrate the pressure of the pumps. Initially, the pumps which we were using, there was no upper limit to the pressure that could be.
It seems it's still not carried down in the field because I'm a sufferer of the last season.
All right, ma'am.
All right. Okay, so tell me, you read the paper, you read the papers. Of course, you would have read today's papers end to end. So it says that it gives a figure for the fiscal deficit. What is that? What figure is that?
Ma'am, India's fiscal deficit target is
No, as of now, where is the fiscal? What percentage of our target is there right now?
I'm not sure of the current level we've reached, but 5.9% is our target, and it's said that we'll reach a little higher than that, 6%.
Would you be able to tell me, in 2014, when we committed to the task of fiscal consolidation,
right, ma'am,
what was the trajectory of fiscal deficit?
After 2014, there was consistent consolidation.
Tell me that. Do you recall the actual figure?
It was around 6% in
3.6, 3.3.
No, 2013-14 it was around 6%. Then it came down to 3.3% by 2019 before the COVID.
I'm talking 2014-15, 15-16.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, ma'am.
It was committed to 3.6.
Right.
3.3 after that, and it actually stuck to that.
Yes, ma'am.
So what happened now? Nothing counts, FRBM and all, nothing matters. We can have any deficit.
No, ma'am, that's not the case. When the pandemic hit, revenues declined because the economic activity.
What was before the pandemic?
It was 3.3%, ma'am. Yes, we had breached FRBM targets even before the pandemic because the economy had slowed down. And plus, FRBM is not a rigid rule.
Today's paper says that April to November is 51% of fiscal deficit.
Right.
Which is very good because normally it's like 70 to 80 at this point of time.
Right.
So what are the reasons for it? Give me 2 reasons.
And firstly,
Why we've managed to have this low, good achievement.
right, ma'am. Firstly, I feel the reason is economic activity. India's economic growth has been higher than expected in the last 2 quarters, due to which our revenue collection has been higher, both direct and indirect taxes. That is the primary reason. And secondly, central government has been of the opinion that freebie should not be promoted, and so it has.
So what is this subsidized food scheme extended for 5 years to 80 crore people?
Ma'am,
That's not a freebie?
I would not count that.
That's not an outgo in the budget?
That's an outgo in the budget, ma'am, but it would not count as an absolute.
Let's not digress. It is an outgo in the budget. I'm countering your point.
Yes, ma'am, certainly it's an outgo in the budget.
Which is not the reason. Not a correct reason. So what else could there be? Think, what else could it be?
Revenue increase is the major reason, ma'am.
Anything else? There are 2 sides of a picture always.
Right. Expenses is the other side.
So what is it there?
Our capex has been quite high, so that's not the reason. We have been spending significantly higher numbers on capex.
All right, you read up. So you've got very interesting hobbies, which I'm sure my other panelists will ask. But you're also a public speaker and you've been awarded for that, huh? Okay. So now I want you to speak for a minute on the theme. The Indian public sector is very pampered and very inefficient.
I mean, when I went into a government office recently.
Sorry, I'm in private sector. Did I say public?
Yes, ma'am.
Private.
Okay. Having worked 3 years in the private sector, I realized nothing is enough. When you have some labor reforms, they're codified, they're better than before, you want more. I want to hire and fire people. So then government comes back and talks to you. You want something more? Private sector is always like, yes, I want more. But often the private sector is not willing to see what it can do for the economy. Like private investment has been slow. And government has been pushing us to lift private investment. But again, private sector is complaining that there are non-performing assets, there is excess capacity, some reason or the other. So yes, it is pampered.
My hypothesis was that the Indian private sector is pampered and inefficient. Now, the converse. It is an efficient, very high-performing private sector.
1991 was a different, before 1991, India was a different story. You had to stand in line, wait for years to get a scooter. But today, you open your mobile phone, scroll through the app and order a new mobile phone online, which is made in India, delivered to you at your doorstep within 1 day. So that is what India's private sector has done across the board. E-commerce, startups are creating new jobs. People are no longer looking at government to give jobs. They are looking at the startups that are emerging in the startup sector. Besides, private sector has been the boon for the government too, because that is where a large part of the revenue is generated, both income tax and indirect tax.
Okay, thank you. Now, if I were to say that the Gaza crisis was an opportunity lost for India, discuss this.
Ma'am, I would not agree with that. India has taken a very nuanced and balanced approach when it comes to...
Which is, what is that nuance and balance? You can just trace it. The first response, second, third, fourth. There are 4 responses so far.
The first response was we explicitly criticized terrorist attack on Israel by the Hamas, and which was in line with our
We did more than that.
zero tolerance to terrorism. That was in line, and I'm not sure, that was the first tweet that went out from the Prime Minister. After that, we took a more balanced approach. We reiterated that we support the two-nation theory on Israel and Palestine. And then we voted in favor of ceasefire at the UN.
Why did we first abstain?
Sorry, ma'am, abstain.
Why did we abstain against the resolution for ceasefire? We abstained.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, because India supported Israel's right to self-defense, just like...
And then they stopped supporting it after that.
No, ma'am. There
were 2 resolutions. One we abstained, then we supported. So what was the difference?
Ma'am, initially we were of the view that Israel would take on the terrorist groups in Gaza and dismantle the terror infrastructure.
But is foreign policy on initial reactions, or is it a continuum over a period of time of relationships between countries and pursuance of national interests?
Certainly, ma'am. It should be a continuous process and based on...
I'll ask you a last question. There was a killing of a Khalistani separatist in Canada and an attempted killing of a Khalistani separatist in US. So, what is your view on this? Should the government be resorting to these sort of things? Would you support it? Would you condemn it? What would you do?
Certainly not, ma'am. This is not India's foreign policy to carry out covert aggressive operations on foreign soil. And India has unequivocally declared that it's not, Indian government establishment is not involved in this.
What was Bangladesh creation? It was not a covert operation initially on foreign soil? When the Mukti Wahani was trained here and our forces also went there, it was not even in Sri Lanka, it was not at all. And in Pakistan also, we don't have RAW operating?
Certainly, ma'am, we do.
So you said you don't have that policy. Where does that come from?
Ma'am, but the conditions were different. Of course.
No, you said that we don't have a policy for covert operations on foreign soil. I would like to know where that comes from.
Aggressive covert operations on foreign soil, that is what I meant. And in case of Pakistan and Sri Lanka, we were...
And Bangladesh was pacifist operation.
No, we had a lot of refugee influx from Bangladesh.
We're not talking of reasons, we are talking of policy. You said a unilateral statement of we do not have that policy. Anyway, so we'll come to this case. So you condemn it. You say that this should not be done and we should turn over all those officers who were responsible for it to the US for being tried in court, right?
No, ma'am, if it's not...
So then why are we defending the Qatari? The death sentence, why did we protest against that and then took up diplomatically, etc., against those 7 Navy personnel in Qatar?
Ma'am, because nothing has been proven and as per the law, you are innocent until you're proven guilty.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Roopak.
Sir.
So from mechanical engineering to startups and now civil services.
Sir.
Why civil services?
So initially, I come from a middle class background, so money was always the first priority. So going to IIT, then graduating, joining a good company. After working for around a year, I realized that money will not make me happy in the long run. That's not the only thing that I need. I need more than that. So then I tried to figure out what other things do I need. And coming from my background, watching my father in the defense forces, I realized prestige, respect, and social status are also very important.
Prestige or power?
Prestige for myself and power to do good to the society, sir. These are the 2 things. Other than that, sir, in whatever projects I did in my private sector opportunities, I realized that wherever I was contributing for good of the society, whatever little it was, that was very satisfying. So I realized job satisfaction has its extension beyond just your paycheck. So that is how I figured civil services would be a good fit for me in the long run.
Okay. What is this Bulbul online app?
Sir, it was an e-commerce startup, video e-commerce startup. So right now on Amazon, Flipkart, the way we buy is by seeing pictures mostly. So what Bulbul tried to do is, it tried to create detailed videos about features of the products for the customers. So it was an early stage startup. It did not do too well during the pandemic and it shut down after that. Yes.
Okay. So you keen on following developments in the Indian startup ecosystem, right? So what's the outlook of Indian startup ecosystem? Especially when I see that none of them are making money. How do you see their future?
Sir, Indian startup ecosystem has certainly increased if we see from the perspective of number of startups that are emerging now. We are the 3rd largest startup ecosystem. And secondly, the funding has also gone up significantly, both by domestic investors as well as foreign investors. And a lot of youngsters are more keen on pursuing startup. Shark Tank India was followed very keenly. So yes, startup ecosystem has improved. But as you mentioned, sir, a lot of startups are not making money, and there is a competition of valuations instead of value creation. So that is a problem. But again, there are startups which are making profit as well. For example, 𝐂𝐻𝐻, it's a bootstrapped company which never took any investment and is making significant, over 2,000 crore profits now. So ultimately, the goal of the startups should be to add value and become profitable.
Any other company apart from 𝐂𝐻𝐻 which is making money?
Yes, sir. Zoho, it's an old company, over 10 years old. It was started by Mr. 𝐂𝐻𝐻𝐵, and it's based its operations in rural Tamil Nadu. So it's even doing social entrepreneurship in that regard. So it's also very profitable.
Okay. So restless protest is again in limelight. What has happened now again?
Pardon, sir, which protest?
Restless protest.
Yes, sir, yes.
Why again it is in limelight? Or in news rather?
Right, sir. Sir, certainly there have been allegations that there were instances of rampant sexual harassment with the female wrestlers. So those are serious allegations and must be looked into, and that is the fundamental.
It was dormant for a year, right? And again it is in news.
So because
what has fueled this protest again?
So because initially the protesting wrestlers were committed that they were told that due action would be taken, and they went to the Supreme Court, FIR was registered, but they still feel that proper action is not being taken and the administration has been lax in taking action against the culprits.
I think something has happened recently. Something has fueled this. Anyway, have you heard of Mr. Henry Kissinger?
Yes, sir. He was an American diplomat. Yes, sir. And he tried significantly to improve the situation in the Middle East.
If you were to ask to assess his contribution to geopolitical or world diplomacy, how would you rate him?
Sir, I'm not that versed with his works that I'll be able to comment on that. Thank you, sir.
Hello, Roopak.
Hello, sir.
Roopak, can you define what is GDP?
So GDP is the value of all the final products and services produced in the economy.
Final products?
Goods and services produced in the economy.
Okay, so if I were to sell my car, would it be included in the GDP?
The second-hand car, you mean, right? You'll sell it second-hand, used car.
I own a car, I'm selling it.
No, sir. It will not be included in the GDP because value addition is not happening.
All right, very right. So can you enumerate some components of the GDP? There are multiple methods of measuring GDP.
Firstly, there is consumption, private consumption. Then the consumption itself is of private sector and the government sector. These are the two. Then we have investment, again, private investment and the public investment. Then we have net exports, which is exports minus imports.
And what is driving India's economic growth right now? Which component is driving India's growth?
Sir, of late, public expenditure on investment has been the major driver.
Public? The government expenditure. Consumption is not the driver?
Consumption is picking up.
What is approximate share of consumption in the GDP?
I'm not very sure of the exact number, sir.
And you are saying that it is the government expenditure?
Yes, sir. Since the pandemic and even before that, when the private investment was slow, it's the public investment that has been driving.
Any idea what share of government expenditure is?
The total investment in the economy is around 30% right now, 30% of GDP.
You are talking about government expenditure or the investment?
Total investment expenditures.
Total investment. Yes. You are saying 30%. Okay.
Right.
And why there have been concerns? Many economists have raised concerns that, despite government spending so much, the investment is not picking up. Government has taken several steps.
Right.
Private investment is not still forthcoming.
Right.
Can you tell me what are the reasons?
Yes, sir. So if we take an extended period of last 7 to 8 years, NPA problem was the major reason. Because banks were not lending, private sector was not investing. But of late, we've seen the NPA levels have reduced significantly to around 3% now. That creates optimism about pickup in future investments. Other than that, there were some policy shocks as well, like GST, demonetization, which created some skepticism among the investors. Besides that, some external shocks like Russia-Ukraine war and then the pandemic, they have also...
But NPAs have come down for quite some time now, over the last 3-4 years.
Yes.
But there hasn't been a commensurate pickup in the investments still. The private sector, especially the corporate sector, they haven't. Any reason for that?
So it's also said that they still are running on excess capacity. It's less than 75%. So it's being said that once it goes up above 75 and approaches 80, then investments will pick up.
Okay. Have you heard about the term windfall tax?
Yes, sir, I have.
What was it?
Sir, when due to an external circumstance, a company's revenues or profits suddenly increase, then the government goes in and rationalizes it by imposing a tax. That is the windfall tax.
Has it happened in India recently?
Yes, sir. It happened in the case of our petroleum companies, oil marketing companies.
Okay. So do you think that it is a fair practice, windfall tax? You have said that government is capturing an upside.
Right, sir.
Tomorrow, if there was an external shock, oil prices right up, government is not going to subsidize a private sector player, say Reliance. So don't you think the government is taking up their upside, but they are not compensating them in their downside? So don't you think that it is unfair practice? And it, in fact, adds to the policy uncertainty that you talked about?
Sir, government does subsidize when the global oil prices...
No, I'm not talking about the government-owned companies. Even they have stopped, giving support to, for example, prices are not, they are market controlled to a large extent. Government is not subsidizing even the PSUs, OMCs.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So yes, sir, that is a bone of contention when we think of it in terms of policy uncertainty. So yes.
And under what law can government, for example, you must have read that all taxes must be through a law.
Yes, sir.
So under what law they have charged this windfall tax?
I'm not very sure of that.
Okay. My last question to you. Can you tell me some methods how startups are valued?
Right, sir. So first can be net present value, where you try to estimate the future cash flows of the startups.
Is it cash flow?
Cash flow, revenues, yes, sir. So, and based on that, if you estimate how much.
Very widely different value will come if you are cash flow, or if you are talking about revenue, or if you are talking about profit.
Right, sir.
So which of the three components is actually used?
It's the revenue, sir. Because startups are not always profit making. So revenues is what we look at. Okay. Other than that,
revenue is very uncertain, especially for a startup. I mean, I can understand, for example, an established company can Reliance, they have a, defined revenue stream.
Right, sir.
Uncertainty is very low.
Yes, sir.
Startups, you don't know what they'll be doing after 1 or 2 years. So don't you think this is a very inefficient method?
Right, sir. It is, sir. But there are other methods as well, like you use the asset value of the startups, net asset value.
So don't you think they are all very subjective and may lead to overvaluation?
Certainly, sir. That is one of the problems that startup ecosystem is facing. Valuations are inflated often to attract investors. So yes, sir. There is
all right. Thank you, Roopak. That's all from my side.
Roopak,
sir.
You graduated from IIT Delhi, right?
Yes, sir.
You were in which hostel?
Sorry, sir?
You were from which hostel?
Jwalamukhi hostel, sir.
Jwala.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, from the past decade, the innovation ecosystem in the country has improved. What's your view? Has it really improved on the ground?
So yes, I would say it has shown improvement, and it's visible in the Global Innovation Index as well, where our ranking has improved.
Global innovation is fine, but what about the field? When I file a patent, in what time it will be registered, and in what time it will be registered and the clearances and all, how much time it is taking? Has it been reduced?
I'm not sure of the exact numbers of how much time it's taking to register the patent, sir. But certainly the number of patents that are happening in India have improved over the last decade. Yes, we are significantly less than what China is doing, significantly less, but it has improved over the last decade.
So why R&D is not improving? Even though we are focusing so much on R&D, and we are also focusing on Make in India, still most of the youth, if you are from IIT Delhi, so you see most of the B.Techs, they don't do any PhD. So why that is happening? Why we are like that? Something is a problem with our minds?
No, sir. I believe we are one of the most innovative cultures, and history has shown that. The problem is not in the minds. The problem lies in, firstly, our education system, which since childhood does not encourage innovation and trying new things. There's a set pattern that you need to follow in the class. You read the textbooks, you give the exams. That is how it's designed. So
how can we change that?
So new education policy is trying to bring in flexibility in terms of the subjects you can choose. You don't have to necessarily stick to only science or arts or commerce. You can take a mix of those subjects. So that is good. Other than that, Atal Innovation Mission is trying to create innovation labs within schools, which again is a good move. So plus, I think most importantly is the expenditure on R&D, which remains only 0.7% of our GDP. Whereas let's say China, it's 1.8% of their much larger GDP. So expenditure needs to go up both from public and private sector.
So how about Make in India in defense sector, whether it has been improved a lot, or what's your view?
Yes, sir. It has improved, but I would say there's still a long way to go before we can completely say we are making in India for the defense sector. There have been success cases.
Can you quote any figures?
Yes, sir. In 2011, our defense exports were only around 600 crores. And recently, Defense Minister has said that in the next couple of years, it can go upwards of 20,000 crores even. Deals have been signed about...
What about defense startups?
Yes, sir. Defense startups are also coming up. They are building drones and signal intelligence capabilities, trying to use AI to analyze images, satellite images. These kind of works are being done.
And what other sectors were making good progress after this Make in India campaign started?
Right, sir. So electronics is one sector. We're making a lot of smartphones in India, although we're just assembling them as of now. Manufacturing of core components is still what we need to do. That is one. Other than that, I would say the service sector startups are doing well.
What about pharma?
Sir, pharma is a large company ecosystem in India, I feel. But startups have not entered pharma so much. But yes, we are making in India. We are the factory of the world. We exported vaccines during COVID. We are doing a lot of exports to African nations even. So pharma Make in India is again a success story.
Okay, I will ask you one last question. What do you think about the freebies that are being given by every state government? More, they are like a poll promises they are making.
Yes, sir.
Rampant poll promises.
Yes, sir.
And what's your view? How can we make reforms in that system? How it can happen?
So certainly, freebies is a concern because of the opportunity cost it has. You're spending on something that you're not able to spend on more critical issues like health, infrastructure.
So how do you deal with it? What should be the solution?
Sir, firstly, I feel Election Commission, and it has already done that. It has given guidelines for the parties to include in their manifesto how the freebies would be funded. That is one thing, but it's not the only step that we can take.
Then what can be the solution?
Yes, sir. The solution can be the voters need to be conscious. They need to ask the people who are standing in elections that how the freebies that they're promising would be funding, where would the funding come from, what budget would be cut. Again, that is a little too much to expect from the large voter base we have, but civil society groups, think tanks, media should have that debate. If a particular freebie is being promised, how would it be funded? So that voters become more conscious about it.
Good. Thank you.
So, well, the comments I have to make is that first of all, your speaking skills are good. You're able to speak well. Just speak up a little more.
Okay.
Speak up a little. And you project a balanced personality, not one polar or extremes. You need to put a little more energy into your conversation.
All right.
As far as points of improvement are concerned, first thing, please read the newspapers.
All right.
It is very obvious that you have not read the newspapers.
Right.
Secondly, if you don't know something, say, I've not read it. I don't know, I'm sorry. Don't try to talk about that because the other person knows. My advice to you is you have only till 4th January. Please read the newspapers of 1 week prior at least and prepare 20 points out of those.
All right.